I was saying to John that the Kay's usually putting for the Beecroft, and apparently the closing date for entries for the Beecroft exhibition is quite soon. It's like the beginning of September. I just sort of found that out for the weekend because I've usually tried to get a piece in, and I've got a piece in for the last few years. But it's they brought it in a bit early this year, so if anybody wants to take part in the Beecroft, you need to crack on. I might give it a miss this year.
To that one.
Yeah. So I've been obviously not here last week because of the Wapping Group show, which is still going on, and it's on for a couple more days. We take it down about 2 o'clock on Wednesday, I think. So, but it's open daily from 11 till 6 until then. So if anybody else fancy going and having a look, it's a really nice show. Going well, going reasonably well.
It is a nice show.
Yes. It came on, didn't it? Joan and Mary came and had a look. Yeah, just thinking a little bit of colour mixing revision. So I'm sure you've all seen this before, and I've lost all my blank copies of this. I'll have to try and make some more or find them. This is basically the ideas that I use for colour mixing, using 2 of the primaries, at least 2 of the primaries. And this all comes from, the idea comes from this book here, Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green. So it's quite an in-depth colour theory book. With an intriguing title. And that's basically where I've taken my colour wheel from. And I've liked this idea because to me it's a bit simpler. The way I was taught to refer to colours is that some are like a warmer yellow or a cooler yellow or a warm blue, cooler blue. That I think can be quite confusing really. So this idea that they have in the book of referring to the colours as having a bias towards the secondary colour, that's really handy, this here. So if you've got a blue that's got a slight bias towards purple, or a yellow that's got a bias towards green, or a blue, whichever, that I think is a more useful way to think about colours. And I've written a few colours here, but there's lots of different colours that would apply. There's used to be, the first red I had in my paint set was called Vermilion, and there's also Scarlet and things like that. So there'll be quite a few orangey reds. There'll be certainly quite a few greeny blues. There's phthalo blue and Prussian blue. So it's quite a good idea if you can just get a feel for how the colours you've got would fit into that wheel. And then, as you know, I've made these sort of charts where you've got the purpliest red and the purpliest blue, and you make the strongest purples you can make. And then if you went for more of an orangey red or a greeny blue, it kind of goes more towards grey or brown here. It's maybe purple about there, but it's not as strong as what you get here. So they're quite good to make up, even if you just do a couple of lines for each mix. So like strong greens, dull greens. Then you know if you want a dull green, which quite often you might want a dull green, you go for something that's maybe going to give you these more muted greens. So they're always a good thing to make up, particularly if you're not very confident in colour mixing. How it applies to night scenes, well, to make one thing would be to make a very dark colour. Just looking where I've got the paintbrushes, here we go. I always find that with night scenes, sometimes starting on a slightly darker ground is a good idea. So I've got a very dark green there and a very dark blue, and if I had one of these dark reds, when I pop that, I'll add that to this one. That's even darker than I've got already, so that's almost like a kind of black. So, you don't necessarily need, that is what I've got here is black, so I've put a bit of black next door to it. It doesn't look too different. You can make something almost as black as black just by mixing all your dark colours. So that can be quite handy, and that way you can get more interesting blacks. I was taught not to use black, but to be honest, nowadays sometimes I use black, but I tend to mix other colours in with it. and it makes it alive.
I was going to say, I have got a black eventually, but it's very transparent black. If I use it by itself, it's not good.
Is
I
it?
have to put another dark colour with
Yeah.
it to get the black, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, one thing that is you'll find with the darker colours is that they're more transparent in general.
Really are.
So that's why it's worth either doing some sort of underpainting, you know, with a. I mean, quite often I'll just do it with another colour. So this picture I did yesterday. I've got some areas I've done sort of like 2 layers. So like the areas where it's quite dark, sometimes you just need to almost like put 2 coats of paint on just to cover it. So that can be a thing. Or start off with slightly darker board. But yeah, it's just the kind of nature of the darker colours is that they are more transparent, whereas the lighter colours, quite often, you know, will have white in them, or some of the, if you've got proper cadmiums, they are quite opaque. So you will find, yeah, with darker colours, you're going to have, even with what I've just mixed there, which I think that was the mix. You know, if I spread it out, you can see some of the colour through, or if I put it over that bit, you know, you need sort of like another layer really. Painting, yeah, night scenes. Sometimes, I mean, generally I do, yeah, I sort of go, a lot of the time darker colours or lighter colours. Something about things like these, it's probably hard to see that, but that's a little street scene with lots of lights in. And my inclination is to paint probably the yellow, that's going to work, yep, that will work. Something like the yellowy, orangey colours first. So you could do something almost like this, and almost painting a bit of, you know, just letting the colours sort of flare out a little bit, perhaps exaggerating that, I think can be quite effective. That's not particularly strong yellow, I'm afraid. And then perhaps as you go into the edge, there might be more orangey. Something like that. And then the darkest colours could be using something like what I've been mixing here. So it could be that they're kind of work that in. And then, because this is still wet, it's going a little bit green actually, so you can sort of gradually kind of work into these areas. It's quite nice to just do a little study like that, just on one area, and just get that to work. Very much. And then for the brightest bit, the highlight, it could be pure white, or you could use white with a little bit of something to warm it up. So sometimes I put the tiniest bit of yellow in with white, almost sort of undetectable, and it just gives it a little bit of warmth, otherwise it can be a bit stark. So let's make a bit more of that. And that can be the kind of highlight. And if you can, just sort of leave it as a nice, and that's the thing with quite often darker colours look better thinner, and the highlights just, you know, thicker, more impasto, and it can just look more effective really. So, very little small demo.